Anton Chekhov was born in Russia in 1860 and died 44 years later. In the course of his short life, he wrote more than 500 short stories and more than a dozen plays. His most famous four plays, The Seagull, The Three Sisters, Uncle Vanya, and The Cherry Orchard, are performed constantly around the world. His short stories are a masterclass in empathy, clarity, and complication. There are no easy answers to be found in Chekhov's writing. He shows us people and the world as they are, not as we would like them to be. There is an absorbing dailiness to his characters' lives. They eat, they smoke cigarettes, they argue, fret, have affairs. They wonder what will truly fulfill them. They desperately want to live worthwhile lives, but they can't stop longing for some person, some place, or some version of themselves just beyond their reach. I took a course on Chekhov a little more than a year ago at the University of Toronto. My professor was Julia Zarankin, a Russian literature specialist who was born in Ukraine and emigrated to Canada when she was 3 years old. And Professor Zarankin was my guest on the Sunday edition last April as part of a special program called We Must Go On Living, Anton Chekhov for the 21st Century. That program was produced by Pauline Holsworth. Why is he special to you?
I think what I love most about Chekhov, and probably one of the reasons that I think about Chekhov at least once a day, is his ambiguity. Things are never clear-cut in Chekhov. He presents us a world where you sympathize or empathize with every single character, no matter their point of view, no matter what they've done in their life. Virginia Woolf said that Chekhov really tests our fitness as readers. So Chekhov does something different. He forces you outside of your comfort zone and forces you to confront your own preconceptions and your own sort of biases and forces you to rethink them through the reading of his stories. What always strikes me about Chekhov when I reread him now is just how modern he is, and especially a lot of the modern concerns, like in Uncle Vanya when he's talking about environmentalism. Those are some of the, hot topics that we're talking about today. I think part of the way he manages that is by looking at people not so much in terms of their belief, but in terms of their complexities. And as people, we haven't really changed in the past 150 years ago. Our anxieties are still the same. We're still trying to live a good life. We still wonder what that means. We're still chasing happiness, even though it's an elusive concept. So whether our politics or our ideas have changed, our fundamental humanity hasn't.
The way he deals with this question of happiness is fascinating because he, in a sense, he doesn't really deal with it. He lets the characters talk about it and walk around in it and handle it. What is his view of happiness? Is it a process or is it an end?
I think happiness for Chekhov is an extremely ambiguous concept. It's this thing that we're constantly after. We're searching for it. We're desperate for it. We live for happiness, and yet we couldn't define it if we were hard-pressed to define it. And so I think Chekhovian characters, they're always running away from something or running toward something, running toward this amorphous notion of what it means to be happy. They know they want it, but they don't know what it is. Just like the three sisters who are desperate to get to Moscow.
He keeps saying, to
Moscow. They don't get there. They never get there, first of all. And they have no idea what it means, and they have no idea what it would mean to live there.
Did he have an ideology himself? Did he wasn't, you made it clear in the class that he was not a moralizer.
No. I think he's the opposite of a moralizer. His goal is really to present life in all of its messy complexity. And I think in one of his letters to his friend Suvorin, he actually said that the only people who think they know, the only people who think they understand are charlatans and fools.
He was a physician. He was a doctor. And I was reading something, I think it was an essay by Tobias Wolff, the American writer, who said that he looked at life as a doctor, as a diagnostician, without making moral judgments.
I think that's a really lovely way to put it. He's diagnosing the problem, but not providing a solution ever for the reader. And so some people are frustrated with that experience of reading a Chekhov story because we never know where he stands at the end. And he breaks the story off just before we would want him to. So there's always that level of ambiguity at the end.
Can you define or describe a Chekhovian character? Do they have something in common?
A Chekhovian character is living two lives at once. There's this passage in Lady with the Lapdog when Chekhov says through his character that we have an outer life and an inner life. This sort of outer life which lives according to the laws of society, and this inner secret life which is our true life. And the Chekhovian character is constantly wrestling between these two lives. And a Chekhovian character also lives very much in the mundane, ordinary world.
Yeah. Is he trying to dislocate us in some way, or is he trying purposefully to make us feel a bit uncomfortable?
I think both, and that's also what makes Chekhov so modern. He is trying to dislocate us, and he's trying to dislocate us from our own beliefs and trying to make us question how we live and what we think truth is. And absolutely, it makes us uncomfortable. Part of what makes it uncomfortable is the experience of reading a Chekhov story often makes you sympathize or empathize with somebody who you never thought you'd be empathetic toward.
I want to throw a quote at you from Robert Frost, whom I love his poetry. He said that he can sum up everything he's learned about life in 3 words: it goes on. That's a kind of Chekhov statement, isn't it, in a way?
It absolutely is. If there's one thing that Chekhov's characters manage, it's resilience. They persevere. They persevere in spite of everything that happens, that life goes on. And in the play Uncle Vanya, toward the end of the play, their lives have just crumbled around them. They're left destitute. And the servant Marina, she still lights the samovar and she still feeds the chickens, and that life goes on. And I think Chekhov knew that as a physician, and as he died very young. He died at the age of 44. He suffered from tuberculosis. He was not blind to the difficulties of life, and yet we continue.
The fact of his mortality, did that influence his writing, do you think?
Absolutely. In many of his stories, characters grapple with their mortality, and they all know where they're headed.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
So there's a constant awareness of that and a constant desire to live life fully, and along with that, an inability to live life fully. So that's one of the big Chekhovian paradoxes. We want to live so badly, and we don't know how.
Can we go to Chekhov and get some kind of solace from reading him?
I get a tremendous amount of solace from Chekhov because I think he really recognizes the central paradox of life, which is that we live as best we can, knowing that all of this is absurd, knowing that life is going to end, knowing that all our decisions are problematic. And yet, in spite of that, we persevere. What Chekhov was really after is this understanding that life is absolutely beautiful and absolutely horrible.